Within the first month, we generated $6,000 in revenue on a home where the mortgage was $1,500. So to
Wow.
me, I was like, okay, how do I do this again? And that's really how we got started with short-term rental investing.
Are midterm rentals right for you? Well, that is exactly what we're going to be talking with Dr. Rachel. Thank you so much for coming on. You are the name that I think of when I think of midterm rentals. So I could not be happier to have anybody else come on this episode to discuss this with me. How you doing today?
Oh, Becky, I am great now that we're here. Thank you so much for the community that you have built around Lady Landlords, for all of the value that you put out there each and every week. I know it's a lot of work that goes into just providing value to the community. So I really hope everyone listens in and shares this episode with all of their community, because I think it's going to be a really fun topic for today.
Yeah, we in Lady Landlords always have that debate of long-term rental, short-term rental, midterm rental, right? And I wanted to make sure, I feel like I've had the short-term rental episode, we've had long-term rental episodes. So here you are going to bat for midterm rentals today.
Yep.
All right. But what I would love to just do is, can you just share who you, the woman behind even real estate investing, really is?
Yeah, so I'm this little girl from Haiti, which is one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, but rich in spirit, raised in the inner city of Miami, went on, got the doctorate, did all the things. Hooray, yay, got a doctorate. But that came with a hefty amount of student loan debt to the tune of about $500,000, Becky. And so
What? You had student debt? That's crazy. I never hear that.
oh my goodness, right? Jaw dropping. But nevertheless, I thought to myself, okay, how do I overcome this? So found some great resources out there that were timely for me specifically. But as we're kind of plugging away, my husband and I, we were plugging away at the student loan debt, we were thinking to ourselves, well, is this really what life has to offer us? Working overtime, five different jobs between the two of us at one point, moonlight shifts again and again and again. And then I read a quote from Warren Buffett that said, if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. And so that was a gut punch. And I found myself taking off that Dave Ramsey hat and putting on the bigger pockets hat, because back then, circa 2017, 2018, there was a lot of content on there that was geared towards those who were beginning. And I really leaned in and evaluated all of the strategies that they were sharing. But for me, a professional woman with a whole husband, two boys, three dogs, the accumulation of hundreds and hundreds of doors was not the most enticing. So I landed on the short-term rental strategy, where I calculated the calculation for me, Becky, was that, okay, so all I need is two really good doors to be able to continue to make the impact on the debt that I wanted to make, and to be able to cut back on the madness of the W-2 1099 schedule. And so that's what we did. We jumped all in to the short-term rentals, and we stumbled upon the midterm rentals, and we have not looked back since then. But we can break it down a little bit, but that's
Right.
who I am in a nutshell.
No, thank you very much. So yes, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to go through a lot of those different steps there, because I think your journey of how you went from, once again, professional medical career and started to get involved in real estate, and then also understood where that pivot was, is incredibly important, right?
Yeah.
So when you were still working in the medical field, did you
Yeah.
enjoy your day to day? Was that something that you were at least like, hey, I enjoy what I do for a living, there's a passion here, and felt that you were in the right spot there?
I did. I did for a number of years. I started to find myself, though, feeling a little bit, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's almost like I need to jump out of my skin, like this itchiness. Like, I think I'm made for more. I think I'm made for something else. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, because, I did the residency, got the
Mhm.
doctorate, did all of these things, and ended up with like a really nice, cushy job. And so for me to go out there with my fellow sisters in medicine and say a peep of a complaint, that would not be well, that would not be welcomed. Okay.
Right.
So, having that guilt of, wow, I've really carved out a work from home situation, really nice situation, but I still struggled. I really still struggled. And what I think I was struggling with is that there were some things going on that I didn't love. There
Mhm.
were opportunities that I could see myself building a future for the stakeholders and the owners, but yet my future wasn't well defined. And I didn't
Right.
like not having control of my own future as I'm putting all of my energy, my efforts, my time capital, my intelligence to build someone else's empire. So I think that was a part of it. I don't think I've nailed it yet, but that was probably a part of it.
Okay, the reason I ask is because once again, in this idea of using real estate investing for financial freedom, whatever those goals are, it doesn't mean we actually have to hate or even want to leave what
Mhm.
our day job is. This is also
Yeah.
something to really be able to supplement. Once again, it sounds like we'll get more into this, but it sounds like it was really for you just to help with some of the debt from your
Mhm.
student loans at first, changed probably down the line,
Yeah.
but and the other thing that I wanted to point out is it's also okay to question, is this really the right thing for me? Right?
Mhm.
That was still what you worked so hard on and for so many years to really accomplish becoming a doctor. And you
Yeah.
did. You did that. And I just want our other ladies listening right now to understand that it's okay to then get to that spot and still say, "Hey, what's now next for me?" Just like
Yeah.
you did. Because I think for those that get end up through higher education, the more years of school and the more we pay, the more difficult it seems to be able to sit with ourselves and say, oops, I want to go a different direction. A lot of
Right.
people are just like, well, I already dedicated 20 years and, $500,000 to this. I guess
Yeah.
I have to stay in this until I die.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you really kind of said, it was difficult for you to speak up and complain about anything at that point in time. And that was, I'm sure, very hard, but you
Yeah.
were able to overcome that and still say, no, there is something more that I want. And I kind of need to scratch that itch.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
So you found Dave Ramsey, it sounds like, and that I feel like Dave Ramsey is a lot of people's, it was mine, very much introduction to financial literacy. And also the thing we have in common there is Dave Ramsey is who helps with debt. I was in a similar position as well. So how did you come across Dave Ramsey? Were you and your husband just like, I don't know, let's just go Google podcasts about budgets and debt? Or how did that start with this financial literacy journey?
Yeah, I think I just heard him on a podcast. I stumbled across him on a podcast. And at that point, when you're ready to listen, the message comes out, right? So I
Right.
guess I was ready to listen. And I was really getting into what he was sharing. So I will caveat, my husband was not on board. My husband still isn't on board with Dave Ramsey. My husband's not on board with most of the things that I engage with. We could talk about that in a moment. But nevertheless, it wasn't me and my husband. It was just me. It was me trying to clobber it on my husband's head. But he was like, no, you made your bed, lady. You go in
Okay.
line. He's very conservative. He doesn't like to spend more than what he has. I think he has Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey was viewing, the messaging that he was providing. But yeah, I
Interesting.
stumbled upon it and then I was hooked because I really needed a framework, Becky. You and I, we
Right.
both love framework. So yeah, I needed a framework, a step by step, and it was simple, right? $1,000 emergency fund. I was like, okay, I think, yeah, we can figure that out. And then step two, and then step three. And so for me, that was exactly what I needed right then and there. And it
Mhm.
really got us going. We made massive changes and we started to make some moves. We got rid of nearly half of our student loan debt, but I'm a future pacer. So I started looking into the future and saying, okay, what's on the other side of this? Is it a $0 net worth? And that just
Right.
didn't sit right with me. And so I became Dave Ramsey-ish and hopped off of that wagon and found a way to invest in that very first property by using the same strategy of accumulating our
Mhm.
funds, snowballing a savings account and purchasing that first property.
Now, what had you go with rental property rather than put everything in stocks or mutual funds or another place? What made you say that real estate investing was going to be that future next step for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it was just the numbers. So I started to do
Mhm.
my analysis. I did my evaluation of all of the different investing strategies. And back then, there was a new word that came on the horizon, and it was cryptocurrency and
Mm.
Bitcoin. So I even looked at that back. I was looking at everything. I was like, how am I going to get a return on my investment. And so
Mhm.
when I ran the numbers, I looked at all of the different models. For me, real estate felt as though it was the most attainable. It was one that was approachable. It was one that I can potentially see cash flow sooner rather than later. And so I went all in on a real estate. However, we know
Mhm.
real estate, there's hundreds of ways to skin that cat, right?
Right.
So yeah, in the medical profession, we're big targets for the hedge funds, the investment firms, the
Mhm.
syndicators, and the capital raisers. So I looked at all of those strategies. Everyone's like, buy a big apartment. I'm like, okay, great. That sounds good. Lots of doors. But I ran those numbers. First of all, it's going to take a lot of money for a down payment unless
Mhm.
I'm a part of a fund, a pool of other investors that are putting some money together. And at the end of the day, I really leaned in. I spoke with specific lady landlords. I spoke with specific investors who were willing to not just market to me, but give me the transparency. And I would ask the question, hey, what does that check look like on a quarterly basis? And when I heard it was $75, that didn't excite me. I was like, that's not for me. I'm fighting for my life. $75 a quarter is just not going to do anything for me right now in my phase of life, in my stage of life. Maybe in my 70s, if it's just totally passive, that's not going to bother me much. But I have expenses, I have mouths to feed. So I
Right.
went down the line to all the investing strategies and I was looking at two things, Becky. I was looking at, will it give me a return on my investment? And will it give me a return on my energy? And so I evaluate
Mhm.
fix and flip, which was very much the route that I was planning on going. But the return on energy part of the equation was not being fulfilled at all because now I have a whole full-time job, right? Where I'm chasing down contractors and making sure subs are showing up on time. If I'm going to really lean into the fix and flip, I already have a full-time job. I couldn't afford another full-time job. I had several full-time jobs, I feel like at that point. And so I just kept going down the line. And the
Mhm.
one that made the most sense for me for the amount of money that I had in hand, and it was $19,000 for either a purchase. I was thinking of purchasing a whole property for 19,000. We had a bottleneck that didn't occur. That ended up being a down payment on a property. With that $19,000, we got into a property that was, I would say, like the ugliest property in one of the nicest areas, right?
Mhm.
Added a little bit of capital to spruce it up a little bit. And we got into high upper end, I call it upper end luxury short-term rental investing. And that's where we started. And within the first month, we generated $6,000 in revenue on a home where the mortgage was $1,500. So to
Wow.
me, I was like, okay, how do I do this again? I just want to do this two or three times and I am golden. And that's really how we got started with a short-term rental investing.
So what's interesting is that it wasn't just short-term rentals, but it was also luxury short-term
Yes,
rentals. When you
yes.
were going through that evaluative process, what made you also then niche down even more from short-term rentals to the luxury area?
Again, it's the numbers, Becky. The beauty of short-term rentals is the numbers are out there. So at the time, there is still actually a tool called AirDNA. So
Mhm.
I purchased a 1 month subscription for AirDNA for my particular zip code that I was interested in. And I drilled down and I said, okay, one bedrooms are making this amount, two bedrooms can make this, three bedrooms. And I would not only look at the bedroom count, I would really lean in and evaluate, well, what's the difference between this property that's a four-bedroom that's making this amount and this property that's four-bedroom that's making $2,000 or $3,000 a month more, and just use that as my template
Mhm.
and not reinvent the wheel. If there are properties already generating that amount in that market, go ahead and take some time and lean in and figure out, well, okay, so it does have a looks like it has a second living room. You remember how those older homes, there's that fancy living room that your mom didn't
Uh-huh.
let you go into, but their second living room they're using with a foosball table and a pool table. Oh, so they just create a little experience there. Okay, got it. So when I am looking to purchase, my buy box has, hey, I would love a property with a second living room, so it made a list of the things that I know have the potential to generate more revenue so that I'm not just flying solo, I'm not just flying blind. The information is out there. And so I became really laser focused on this is my specific buy box. This is the type of
Hmm.
property that I want because I know that I'm going to get the return on investment by leveraging that particular checklist.
What I love that I'm hearing here is research.
Yes.
Actually doing research, looking into not just your numbers, but I can see you like looking through listings, being like, wait, okay, I can use this space over here, but where's that second living room, right? Where can I make entertainment? Where can I make an experience that once again, thinking about not just short-term rentals, but that luxury short-term rental that's
Mhm.
really going to make a difference rather than, hey, here you go. We got 2 towels and a roll of toilet paper. See you after the weekend, right? That's not going to work in that space at all. I'm hearing a lot of the research that went into this. So that way, when you were ready to move on a property, also really feeling that you only needed the two to really
Mhm.
hit your goals, you had to be
Yeah.
very selective
Yep.
in what you were picking. What was something that popped up unexpected for you in your research that you were that either made you have to take a step back, maybe made you reevaluate some of the research you did? Did you come across anything that you were like, whoa, where did this wrench come into?
Yeah. So one of the things that came up, and I think it was both expected and unexpected, is HOA, right? So for
Mm,
me, the HOA research is very important. And for me, even to this day, the regulatory constraints research is very, very important. So I look at HOAs. If the property's in an HOA, I avoid that like a plague. We do have a couple properties within HOAs, but the properties that are in HOA markets, I go into them if two criteria are met. Criteria number one, the HOA is there because there are actual amenities that are worthwhile, worth paying for. If there's a
mhm,
resort style swimming pool in our vacation market properties, yeah, I can see where the HOA funds are going. It's not just an HOA for the sake of HOA so that Miss Betty is watching over my shoulders, that kind of thing, right? That's not a vibe.
right.
Criteria number two that needs to be met is that more than 50% of the properties that are within the HOA are actual short-term or midterm rentals. So that's criteria number two in order for me to go into that type of market. And we do have a couple properties that are in HOAs, but it's because the amenities are shared amenities and it
Mhm,
is a vacation rental market. And so we're good to go there. So HOAs and regulations, I think, are very important to make sure that you understand what's going on, the community sentiment as well, because that could really
mhm.
tank your investment.
And is that the reason for the 50% being short-term rentals in order for you to move into that space? Because this is actually a topic that comes up on one of my properties that's actually my winter home in the Dominican Republic. Is there tends to always be that battle on the board between those that actually have rentals versus those that it is their personal home. And it always becomes that fight of, well, are we supposed to be catering to the guests that are coming, or are we supposed to be catering to the owners that are living here? It sounds like by putting that criteria of 50% in, you're kind of guaranteeing that the board and the voters are going to really shift towards no, we
100%.
got to do things for the guests because that's the majority. And that's really what the complex is based on. And also that's how the complex itself is also making its money.
100%. Yeah, because I want
Very
that
smart.
vote, right? I want
Right.
50% or more. I want the board members to be very STR friendly. They have renters themselves. I love it when the president of the board has a rental themselves. So that's even a bonus. That's the cherry on top.
Right. Otherwise, if you went with one that only had maybe 25 or 30, you're already outnumbered.
You're
There's
outnumbered.
always that chance. Hey, you know what? Board voted no more short-term rentals. And then now all of
Mhm.
a sudden that impacts your business greatly.
Yeah,
So I
100%.
like that. I like that very much as a criteria. So now you
Mhm.
have your short-term rentals. You're growing in that space.
Yeah.
How did that whole 2020 thing impact really where short-term rentals are? How do you feel that that now made an impact on your short-term rentals in the past 2, 3 years? Do you feel like that had an impact or not really so much for you?
We peaked, our income peaked during that time. It was interesting because the lack of travel caused a lot of people to need extended stays in our
Mhm.
properties in particular, which was great. We had a family who they had sold everything. They were planning to move to Europe. They couldn't. They were
Wow.
stuck. So they ended up moving into one of our properties, and it worked out really well for us, thankfully. It sure worked out really well for us. I really think it's because we shared with our community what we were doing. We created a little
Mhm.
WhatsApp channel for other landlords and other short-term rental hosts within our community. And so
Mhm.
the lines of communications was open. We're able to share leads with one another. If someone had a vacancy and there was an inquiry that came in, say, hey, someone's looking for a place. So your network really is your net worth when it comes to real estate investing. The more friends you make in this world, the better, because this is a team sport. Real estate is a team sport.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's really cool that you decided to kind of pull together with some of the other hosts
Hmm.
and not only ensure your own livelihood, but really also help support the families that once again were in these situations that were just stuck. Once again, talking about a family that wasn't able to move into a new home that had already was in that process. There were a lot of people in that situation, and I think that was incredibly important. So, since pandemic, since time now moving forward,
Yep.
do you still feel that short-term rentals would still be the strongest way to go and that the numbers are the best in short-term rentals compared to other strategies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say yes in certain markets. So if you have a market that is a traditional touristic destination, those markets are tried and true, right? So they have been generating revenue for short-term stays for years and years and decades and decades. So yes, I believe it's very, very strong. The big pivot is that guests are pickier, right?
Mhm.
Guests are pickier. So the return on energy with you having to up level every quarter may be something that a lot of hosts and landlords were not ready for. So keep that in mind. For instance, you go to a market like the Orlando market. Becky, there are 33,000 listings in the Orlando market, right?
Right.
Whereas in some of my markets, there's 700, 1,500. There are 33,000. Let that breathe for a moment. And these listings look like they're straight out of a Marvel movie, right? So that's going to be expensive to keep up with, and you got to
Mhm.
keep leveling up. So I'm very strategic in the markets that I like to invest in. I like medium markets, anywhere from 100 to 1,000 listings. That's my sweet spot there. I'm looking for inefficiencies as well in the market. I'm not going into the market looking for $1.2 million homes. I know we said luxury, but let's set the stage. Our budget is anywhere from 300,000 to 700,000. So the numbers have to make
Mhm.
sense. The math has to be mathing in order for us to go in there. So don't think luxury has to break the bank. It doesn't. As a matter of fact, one of our community members just purchased something for 275,000, which I'm like, that's unheard of. But based on what they're going to really add on to the property, we create a few sizzle features. They're going to create a real luxury stay. We had another member purchase a $500,000 property, and we were expecting $500 a night. But
Mhm.
he really did a number on it. He got a, what do you call it? A container style pool, really nice.
Huh.
And the property got booked for $1,500 a night by a physicians group for a retreat. And so that was three times what the expectation was. So it is going to demand that we lean in and we put more into it if we're going to squeeze as much juice as we can from the short-term rental realm. But
Mhm.
for me, I love having a mix and a hybrid model, like a half and half short-term and short rentals. And the other half is mid-term rentals. I love the midterm rental strategy, particularly the homeowners insurance policy strategy, which is different and probably going to be a little controversial because when people hear midterm rentals, they think travel nurses. But this is
Mhm.
something I really want to unpack with the community for sure to make sure that they're aware there's other midterm rental strategies out there, not just travel nurses.
Right. And we were talking about this earlier. I feel like in Lady Landlords, we see all the time people saying, oh, well, there's a hospital here. This
Yeah.
means it's a good market for midterm rentals, right? And as I was saying to you before, well, there's a hospital. I mean, there's not hospitals everywhere, but usually, like, when you think of markets, you mentioned Orlando. Pretty sure there's going to be a hospital in Orlando, right? Like those areas, yes, there are definitely places that are a little bit more rural around the United States that access to medical care is very different. We're not
Yeah.
speaking about those. So it's just very interesting that whenever we see a hospital, people are like, oh, perfect market for midterm rentals. So can you kind of help debunk that myth a little bit and
Yeah.
talk about then the strategy that you've really been using to diversify now into midterm markets?
Yeah, absolutely. So this came about when we saw the successes of the first property. We said, you know what, let's do this again. We want to do this again. And we wanted to do it with a little bit of a larger property, a little bit bigger property to see if we can get some more returns. We figured it out. We had our systems in place, our operational processes were dialed in, and we said, let's do this again. So we took the proceeds from the first property. We had a 401k from an old job and we cobbled that together, plus a bonus check, if I can remember how we came up with that second down payment. So we cobbled all, listen, we're shaking up the sofa cushions to come up with that second down payment. And then we purchased a second property in that same market, a little bit larger. And the beauty of having two properties in the same market, you have your cleaning team that you vetted, you have your maintenance team. So it's like you're not starting from scratch, right? So I'd rather scale a little bit deeper than going wide. Just a
Hmm.
little tip there. Okay, so with this second property, I said, you know what? I want to try a 30-day stay just to get the cleaning team acclimated to the property because I just wanted them to get more familiar. We're going to do some training with them and turn on a pricing tool. I use a pricing tool, a dynamic pricing tool called Price Labs. So I turned on the pricing tool. It uses AI to identify, well, is there vacancy in the market? Is there scarcity in the market? Are there bookings that are happening at a high ratio or high percentage? And it will price your property every single night so that you don't manually have to do it yourself. And
Hmm.
so when I turned it on, I was expecting, Becky, anywhere from like $8,000 or $9,000 a month is where it was going to get priced at. Dare I think $10,000, but that's just outrageous. Like who has that money? I don't have $10,000 a month to
For
rent
a
out a
month, right?
property, right? I just didn't know anyone in my world that had that amount. It priced the property at $28,000. And I was like, okay, no way. This pricing tool is completely broken. There's no way that this is correct. Let me turn it off. But when I turned it off, it got booked prior to me turning it off. Prior to me turning off, it got booked. I was floored, Becky. And I started to ask myself, where else am I playing small in life? Because who has this kind of money? And so it turned out I tapped into a couple of different midterm rental markets because the following month it got booked for 21,000, then
Wow.
15,000. And that's how that particular property landed on Netflix because of the back end, yeah, the back end revenue that it was generating. So the two midterm rental avatars that I tapped into was the filming industry in Georgia.
Hmm.
Okay, so it got booked by the executive director of The Walking Dead and her family, which was super cool. And
Oh yeah.
then the insurance policy holder strategy as well. The following months,
Hmm.
it got booked by families who were displaced from their homes due to there was a water pipe that burst behind a refrigerator, and it was an 11-bedroom home. Well, where are you going to find an 11-bedroom home in suburban Georgia to rent? You're not. Our property was 6 bedrooms. And so that was perfect for their needs. And so they loved it. However,
Hmm.
since they were coming from $1 million plus home, the revenue potential and the allowance that they had to rent out another property was quite high. And so that's how
Right.
they were able to pay us the higher rate, which was very interesting. I was floored and I thought to myself, okay, this is what we need to do because they initially booked for 1 month, Becky, but they ended up
Hmm.
staying with us for 5 months because, it takes time for contractors to get
Right.
all of the renovations completed.
Right. A couple years ago here in New York, actually, my realtor, his house was hit by a tree during a hurricane.
Oh,
He
wow.
needed, his entire family needed to be relocated. They were able to find a place, and same thing. I think he was there. Originally, he was supposed to be there for about a year
A
because they
year.
had to rebuild his entire home.
Wow.
Yeah, from this tree that went, it split the house in two, completely split. It was horrible. And he ended up there for a year, but then once again with contractors taking longer than expected as well. I think he was there for like 15 or 16 months in that location. And what the insurance company, he's a very good friend of mine, so I know, but like just what the insurance company was actually paying that landlord was just absolutely crazy for that time. And
Yeah.
then once again, when it had to be extended, she was like, sure, I'll do that. I'll keep taking this. It was a fantastic option. So I can see the same with you're saying once again for that house with that was $1 million+ property needing 11 bedrooms, their allowance was going to be pretty high.
Yeah.
And once again, that's what you were still getting that on your property. So how were you able to tap more into those now two very, very niche
Yeah.
selective avatars?
Yeah, it's so interesting. And so here's what I want the community to know, Becky. They may not have the Hollywood of the South like I do in Georgia, but there are over 60 different midterm rental avatars that are out there. So if you're near a university, there's higher education. If you're near
Mm-hmm.
the state capitol, there's political campaign staff that need midterm rental housing. If you are near a vacation market, there are climate migrants, snowbirds. There are so many people who need month to month furnished housing stays. So it would behoove you to really look at your market to see who you can cater to and who you can serve, in addition to the insurance, temporary housing guests that are everywhere. Everywhere. Just yesterday, we had a family who had a lightning strike. Listen to this lightning strike. It turned into a fire, and then the rain came through. It was like
The fire damage and water damage.
fire damage and water damage all in one.
Aw,
The entire roof is gone.
wow.
It was really bad because of the fire. And so it happens everywhere. And the reason it happens, it can be due to a weather-related anomaly, or it can be due to accidental. I just saw on the news today, sadly, some teenagers were setting off fireworks and an entire neighborhood it burnt down.
Wow.
It turned into a fire in the forest and the trees, and it just impacted quite a few families. There are water pipes that are bursting. I had a water pipe that burst. I had a skylight that started leaking, and it was like, so this is happening everywhere. As long as there is a density of homes
Mm-hmm.
in an area, there's an opportunity to serve at this capacity. The two markets that I would say to avoid if you want to tap into the strategy is markets with extreme seasonality, such as like Cape May, where all of those homes are secondary homes. If something
Right.
happens to those homes, of course, they have their primary home to go with. So that's not really going to be a great market for this midterm rental policy holder strategy. And the second market I would say to avoid for this particular strategy are extreme rural markets, because those
Mm-hmm.
markets, of course, there's not enough density of homeowners to support this model. But we are seeing this everywhere. We're
Wow.
seeing this everywhere. As long as there's weather related anomalies, we're going to see this. As long as there are children and adults playing in the garage trying to cook something up, it's going to happen. As long as there are water pipes that
Right.
burst in the summer or freeze in the winter, it's going to happen for whatever reason. And just putting yourself out there and making sure that you have a listing on the most popular platforms is going to attract those guests to your property. So once we get that initial contact from the insurance company, to this day, from 2018 to this day, I still have their number in my Rolodex. And if I have a vacancy coming up, I'll just reach out and say, hey,
Right.
Melody, I have this vacancy coming up. What do you got? And so 9 times out of 10, she has another family in need. And that's how we continue to keep the ball rolling. And then we have that WhatsApp channel inside of our community where we're sharing those leads as well.
That's fantastic. That's really interesting that it's kind of a once you can kind of get into it,
Yeah.
right? Is
Mhm.
there is there any tip or any step that somebody can take to either attract those insurance companies? Because is it the insurance company that's finding that property for that person, or is it the person that's going to be displaced that's looking at listings and then going back to the insurance agent saying, hey, this is a property that I want to move into?
Okay, so you're asking a great and an advanced question. It's actually both. Okay, so let me break it down for you a little bit. Say the disaster strikes, the
Right.
the home is deemed unlivable. Okay, so that's step one. Step
Hmm.
two, the family moves out of their home and they move into a rental property, preferably your home, initially for 1 month, and they keep extended. And then step three, the insurance temporary housing agency, their agency
Hmm.
pays you month after month after month. So once disaster strikes, the family calls the insurance, and they have a number of resources that come out to assess the damage, to determine contractors. So those are split up into departments. As far as the housing side, this is where we make our bread and butter. The housing side, what's great about all states, State Farm, Progressive, they stay in their lane. They're not
Hmm.
interested in finding housing. That's just not their expertise. They're more actuarial, they're more
Hmm.
projecting the numbers, right? So they have their adjusters trying to figure out estimates for the property rebuild. They completely outsource the housing to entirely different companies called temporary housing agencies. And
Okay.
inside of the temporary housing agencies, they have relocation specialists, they have search specialists who
Wow.
search for housing for these families. So, one of the number one temporary housing agencies in all of North America, write this down, guys, it's called ALE Solutions. And so they have a link there where you could just register your property. You list your property right then and there. And then they'll reach
Wow.
out to you once something happens in your community, in your neighborhood. I've had them contact me within 3 days or within 3 months, right? So the sooner you can
Right.
list, the better. But it really depends on what's going on in that community at that time. So the insurance company, the temporary housing agency that they outsource to, is a third party. They can reach out to you from their portal. They can reach out to you from Airbnb, which they do a lot. They can reach out
Hmm.
to you from Furnish Finder, Corporate Housing by Ono, VRBO. They're just looking for housing. Their goal is to get
Right.
this family in a house as soon as possible. That's their KPI, their key performance indicator. At the end of the week, their bosses want to know, how many families did you place? That's how they, yeah, yeah.
Right.
So let's help them. Let's help them place some families,
Right.
you know? And so that's the angle that you want to take. If you ever encounter them, hey, I'm really wanting to help the Smith family get into this house as soon as possible, just
Right.
kind of come from it, from that approach. However, you and I, lady, I bet you and I were very picky people. So while they're looking, I'm looking too. So I would be that homeowner, that mom, especially moms with maybe a
Right.
special needs child, or mom who's that sandwich generation who's taking care of an elderly person in their household.
Correct.
They want to know what's available to them, and they don't want someone just placing them any old kind of place, right? So they're looking too. So sometimes we're contacted by both the insurance company, the temporary housing agency, the third party of the insurance company, and we're contacted by the family simultaneously. So be aware of that. And I think that's a good thing.
That's interesting how that works. I'm thinking back to my friend that had his house split. He had two children. One of them was actually in senior year
Mm.
of high school.
Yeah,
And originally, when they were working with the insurance, my friend and his wife were very clear that they needed to be in the same school district, right?
exactly.
She'd
Mhm.
actually, this was after COVID. I think the older son, if I remember correctly, his senior year was completely changed due to COVID, right? He didn't have the
Mm.
senior prom, he didn't get the graduation, those types of things.
And then his
Um,
home.
yeah, and then exactly, then he goes to
Yes.
college and his home was split in half. But they didn't want then the daughter, the younger child, to go through that same experience with now
Yeah.
having her senior year where now she was going to be in a new school. And
Mhm.
it was August, right? That's technically hurricane season. It was in August when the tree hit. So same thing, school here in New York starts right after Labor Day. It started this
Yeah.
week. So it was something that they were like, we need to get into a home because we need to make sure she can at least still have her senior year in
Yeah.
that same school district. And
Mhm.
there were just not a lot of options for it. What was interesting, over the 16 months, I'd been to the house multiple times. They had a lot more space than they needed. They had extra bedrooms, but
Yep.
it was really just this was the only location that they could get that was
Yep.
in that same school district to keep her in
Mhm.
the same place. And that was the two of them really advocating, looking up for their own places, trying to figure out where else they could go. Clearly, it helped since he was a realtor. So
Mhm.
had a little extra access and a little bit of support clearly from what he does professionally.
Yeah.
But that was something that was very interesting to look from both sides. Thank you very much for sharing with our listeners a site that they can go to get that ball rolling,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I think your listeners, and what I love about the lady landlord community, they're not only landlords, they're educators too. And they're advocates for their tenants, and they're
Right,
advocates for those that they encounter. So you're absolutely right. The typical homeowner is not expecting to go through something like this. And
right.
so in their minds, you wouldn't believe the number of misconceptions that they have. So Becky, they come to me and they're like, well, you know what? Oh, $5,000 a month. I don't know. Our mortgage is 1,300. There's no way we're going to get approved for 5,000. Well, that's not true. Your monthly mortgage has nothing to do with the
Right.
monthly rate that the insurance is able to pay. So I encourage all the lady landlords to be prepared to be an advocate and to educate them as well and to let them know, hey, let's keep you as close to possible to your school district. You have that right. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that because you're right. They have a lot of misconceptions, and had your friend not been a realtor, who knows where they would have placed them.
Right. And that's devastating for a high school kid to then be told, hey,
Mhm.
no, 17 years, your final year, all new people. Sorry, you don't get to have those memories and that experience that just so
Yep.
many people really want is going through high school. I think one of the other pieces that come up there is it's a really good reminder, even though we're talking about other people and problems at their homes, but really a reminder for everybody, please make sure to have good insurance. It
Yes.
it is very, very important to have very good quality insurance. That is not a place we really want to skimp. And that's exactly how, once again, an insurance company, if God forbid something happens with even your own personal home, and if you need to be moved into another place, it's really your insurance that's helping you. So
Yeah.
now moving into the midterm rentals, you still have short-term rentals too, right?
Yes, I do. I do. So our short-term rentals are located in touristic destination markets for the
Mhm.
most part, but our midterm rentals, we leverage a hybrid model. So for instance, we just had a guest that checked out of our midterm rental, and there are about 5 to 7 days, I want to say, between now and the next guest checking in for the
Mhm.
midterm rental. So we'll go ahead and take a couple 2-night stays in between to fill in the gaps. So our midterm
Fantastic.
rentals, they serve as a hybrid. So I love a good hybrid so that I can fill in those in between time gaps. And it's
Right.
just important in real estate to know, well, what's your opportunity to pivot, right? We've been pivoting like we're ballerinas over the last few years, and you got to know how to pivot. And if you
Right.
position yourself in a way where short-term rentals and midterm rentals are viable options, I think you're in the best position because, of course, long-term rentals most likely are a viable option as well.
I love mentioning that you can kind of mix and match. I
Yeah.
feel so many newer investors come in and they're like, this is my strategy. That's what I'm going to do. And that's what I'm going to stick with. And that's it. That's my lane. And I love that you're saying it's okay to kind of move in and out fluidly through other strategies. So I'm really happy that you mentioned and you threw that in that between midterm rentals, see what else you can kind of fill in, see what else you can kind of book in between that. And
Exactly.
also, we actually just had this with one of our Lady Landlords members. She was looking to rent long term. It
Mm,
just kind of came up that that was not moving as fast as she really wanted in her market. She got an opportunity for a short term rental, picked up somebody for a few weeks, was actually booked her first full month with short term rentals, then was able to parlay that into a midterm rental. And then now she was like, great, I bought myself some time to find, and it's an owner occupied property. So it's something that she really wants to find the right fit for from more of a roommate perspective. And she's like,
nice.
now, thanks to midterm rentals, I was able to buy myself time to
Yeah.
find really the right person. And she's also like, well, if it doesn't end up being a long term rental, I've already done the short term rentals, I've already done the midterm rentals. And you can really mix and match in between there to really maximize your ROI on a property.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I love that you're teaching all of those models inside of Lady Landlord because we have to add as many tools as we can to our tool chest, right? We don't want
Right.
to invest in a property and just watch it fizzle and we're going to suffer in silence, right? What else can we use? What other strategies can we use? So I think it's really important to have those tools in our tool chest to whip them out whenever the opportunity arises.
Right. So, last question I have for you. As I mentioned earlier, you are a midterm rental advocate, right? We had Stacy
Mhm.
St. John on a few episodes ago
Oh,
talking about short-term rentals,
yes.
and she was our advocate for short-term rentals. You're my advocate for midterm rentals. So, I'd love for you to give me the best pitch you can for why midterm rentals are the best. All right?
I love this. Okay, I don't think I was ready for a pitch, so it might be a little bit long-winded. Okay, so here's why I absolutely love midterm rentals. Irregardless of whether your property was found on Airbnb or Vrbo, which are the OTA platforms where short-term rentals are typically found, we get bookings for midterm rentals on those platforms as well. However, when it comes to the temporary housing agency, the insurance strategy, those subsequent months when they ask to extend, you're able to take them off of platform. The first booking, again, Airbnb gets theirs because they did bring in the marketing, but the love, the care, the way you've just set up the property with them in mind, they want to extend, they want to stay in your place month after month after month. And guess what? You get an automatic raise by avoiding those pesky fees without having to add more properties to your portfolio. And I'm talking about anywhere from 3 to 20% of a raise by getting them and booking with them directly. These are some of the most grateful guests that you will ever experience in your life. So they're not the most pickiest, which is great. And so what that means is if there's a little maintenance kerfuffle that we need to address, we don't need to bring in a contractor overnight and pay those hefty premiums. They can wait till Monday. They're okay with that. They're cool with that. Their house just burnt down, so they can wait till Monday. They're so amazing. They're just so grateful. Less turnover. Compared to short-term rentals, less turnover, lower hassle, just really amazing guests. And you're getting to not only create a meaningful amount of revenue, the revenue that we create with midterm rentals are very similar to short-term rental revenue with these extended stays. Our stays are anywhere from 4 to 13 months. That has been the typical length of stay for us. So same amount of revenue as a short-term rental, less turnover, amazing guests, grateful guests. And one more thing, lower operating costs. Ladies, if you're not looking at your operating costs by the end of the year to see what really came home, you are missing out on one of the biggest components in your real estate investing approach. So whatever you're generating on a short-term rental basis, on a long-term rental basis, on a midterm rental basis, you have to subtract all of the expenses that came with it, right? So with short-term rentals, we finally got down to about a 35% operating cost, which is great. Usually short-term rentals are about 45 to 50% operating costs if you haven't operationalized everything. But with midterm rentals, it's 18 to 20% operating costs. So if that doesn't sell you, I don't know what will.
Right. If you can still bring in that same amount of money that you're saying you can with a short-term rental,
Yes.
but now all of a sudden your costs are, cut in half, if not a little bit more there.
Yes,
It's a
ma'am.
huge amount of money more that's gone into your pocket. So
Yes.
thank you very much. That was fantastic. That was exactly what I was looking for. And that really helped recap all of the fantastic reasons why our lady landlords really need to start looking at midterm rentals and start looking into them in a little bit of a different way and with a little more high touch research. So Rachel, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today with the Lady Landlords. I will make sure to put your contact information, also your other website and some other links down in our show notes for all of our listeners today. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Becky.
Of course. For all of our Lady Landlords out there, please do make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you enjoyed today's episode, and I know you did, make sure to leave that 5-star review so that way other women out there can also get the support that they're looking for in their real estate investing journey. Also, take this episode, send it to another woman that might be interested also in growing a portfolio in midterm rentals.
Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords Podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlords.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.